you're ingrained in most American families in diet culture of larger is bad, obesity is a thing. Right. In our industry, like the O word is a no-no because it's not about that. Because we would much rather help the mental health than label you as an obese person. I would be considered obese on the BMI scale. Right. That's how off the BMI scale is. So you go home to a family ingrained in diet culture, which it's not their fault. It is the way our society was produced in that way.
Well, and they see it on TV every day too.
Yeah, like you think of the Yoplait commercial, the itty bitty red polka dot bikini commercial where you just eat a yogurt for lunch to fit into your bikini. These are the messages that were being sent to us as kids, right? So you're getting bullied at school, whatever it might be. You go home to a family who's like, yeah, start eating a little healthier then. Yeah. Why don't we just eat grilled chicken and rice, right? Yeah. Enter orthorexia, enter body dysmorphia, enter all of those thoughts. And that is just as someone who is learning who they are in that critical time, the brain begins to be rewired.
On this episode of TLC Connections, we sit down with Kaitlyn Lorenz, Regional Outreach Manager for Monte Nido, to explore the complexities of eating disorders and the powerful potential for care and recovery. Kate shares her personal journey into mental health, unpacks the impact of diet culture and social media, and highlights the importance of integrated care and treatment. Join us for this important conversation filled with hope and actionable insights. We hope you enjoy the episode.
Welcome to TLC Connections, the podcast where educators, counselors, coaches, and community leaders come together to inspire change, one connection at a time.
Kate.
Yes.
Hello and welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yeah. So our listeners know that you currently work at Monte Nido. Why don't you tell us a little bit about Monte Nido and maybe tell us your journey on how you got there and what your current work is there.
Okay, yes. So Monte Nido is an eating disorder program. I would say we're known for our residential settings. So we were started in California in like a 6-bed type of setting. So really, really small milieu, which is how many clients are in a residential as a milieu. And it was really because there was no eating disorder resources. The woman who founded us recovered from her own eating disorder, and she was like, okay, there's a ton of substance use treatment centers. There's a ton of mental health services. There is nothing for eating disorder. And in Philadelphia, actually, the first eating disorder program was started called Renfrew. They were the pioneers of eating disorder treatment. They did a lot of educationals. They did a lot of training and supervision for therapists who wanted to start treating eating disorder, but it was so just like hush, like eating disorder was not something that you talked about. And I don't know why that is. It was shameful, I guess, just like anything else in mental health. But anyway, so Monte Nido was started by a woman who recovered from her own eating disorder. And it was just one little like residential setting with 6 beds. They had like 2 therapists. It was super small. And they have grown nationally. So basically expanded across the nation.
Okay.
So my job for them is to just make sure that local people in Pennsylvania know about the resource and exactly like how they can utilize us. So I think the best part is that I get to connect with tons of providers, and they're all different. Therapists, doctors, dietitians, hospitals, and I just go and educate them about like signs and symptoms. And if they're already working with eating disorders, I make sure they know like, listen, if you have anyone who comes in, I can even just have a conversation with the families to talk about what that looks like. Sometimes they're not ready for what we offer, right? But I have all the connections to a really good dietitian. That might be all they need for some early intervention. So I just really try and be a resource to everybody in this realm, because not everybody has the space to like investigate that if they don't normally see an eating disorder person, client, whatever. They need help. So, yeah.
I was first introduced to the notion of eating disorders with my children, actually. You mentioned the 2 boys. I have three girls, and at the time, they all 3 attended the school where I also worked, which was kind of nice. I got to drive my children to work. And when my oldest daughter got into middle school, and in my role as administrator of the school, I learned that there was a problem, particularly within middle school girls. So that's when I first learned about it and how prevalent it was. And in preparation for this meeting, I did a little bit of research and learned that there's just a little less than 30 million people that struggle with an eating disorder, which is about 1 out of every 10 people in the country. So again, a huge number. And so I guess my question is, and I also learned that it has basically doubled, the prevalence has doubled over the last couple of decades. And so have you given much thought to why that is? As I'm assuming it might be related to social media to some extent, and I'm sure it's a complex issue with lots of reasons, but what are your thoughts there?
Totally. So I think one of the biggest problems is this idea, and it goes very deep, but broadly, like an idea that smaller is better. And it is ingrained in a lot of things for females. And if we look back into like the 1950s and 1960s of body image and body size and the promotion of women's image all over. And back then, social media was what? Newspapers, magazines. It was always smaller is better. And that's the ideal. And so we have a lot of biases innately. We cannot help it. I have biases and I work in the industry. So when I started, I would catch myself realizing my biases towards a larger body or whatever it might be. And so I think people are predisposed to that. I think it's biological as well as, natural, like nature too. But when your brain gets wired to believe that smaller is better, it's almost like a drug addiction. You can't stop wanting and needing that. And food, we have to eat it. So for us, it's like we can't just put down the substance and walk away and then treat our mental health. We have to literally be taking the food while treating it. And it's a really complex disorder and there's so many different kinds, but I think it started there we call it diet culture. And the movements today are like anti-diet culture movements are really large, but they're not making a lot of traction. And I think social media has impeded that because there is so much more emphasis on orthorexia, working out, eating good, all these things that really can spur an eating disorder to make it worse too.
Yeah.
Super complex.
Yeah, I'm sure you've heard about the new GLP-1 drugs as well. And I don't want to talk about any specific brand, but becoming very popular. I've read that, headline articles that these GLP-1 drugs are basically miracle drugs that could solve the obesity problem in America. I guess, what are your thoughts? Have there been any discussions on the intersection of these new drugs and eating disorders? I guess my question is, do experts in this field feel they help or hurt?
Oh man, we don't know. That's the problem. So our goal is to mitigate mental health crisis. So like when it comes to this, so for example, I just was at a coalition about eating disorders the other day, and the woman running it was a diabetic who is recovering from an eating disorder for 15 years and needs to be on a GLP-1. She has so many systems in place to make sure that GLP-1 does not cause her to lose a ton of weight and fall back into her eating disorder, right? So it could be really life-changing. It's life-changing for her medically. Now there's the other person who maybe has a binge eating disorder, goes on the GLP-1 just for aesthetic reasons. It takes maybe their food noise away, right? It takes the thoughts away. Right. But are they in therapy? Do they have an exit strategy? What are the safeguards around it? I don't know that there's many. So that's where we get into the trouble of like, is this hurting or helping? It can go both ways for sure, because it's a life-changing medication for sure. And I love like the different perspectives I get from outpatient providers or higher level of care providers, because for us as higher level of care providers, we don't have a lot of answers. Like when you're coming into treatment with us, and you're on a GLP-1, at this point, we don't have research on how to work with this yet. It's so new in this realm. So it's almost like if you come into substance use treatment on a drug that's spurring the mental health to make it worse, you have to come off of it, right? But then what if you're diabetic? So it is so individualized, and that's what I think we do really well, and a lot of places do. They have to. Each person is totally individual, and you have to build an entire program around just that person in order to figure out what's going to work best for them and help the symptoms of the eating disorder. So it's such a topic. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Talk a little bit more about kind of the underlying mental health behind an eating disorder. First of all, are you a clinician?
I am not a clinician,
okay.
no.
All right. So just based on what you know, then maybe reading or talking to other clinicians, trying to get to what is the root cause? And I know it's complex, so I know but what are some of the hypotheses, I guess, with the underlying root cause? And
Yeah, there's a lot of different information on this. And I am not a clinician, but I've done a lot of educationals through Monte Nido and other programs, put on a lot of free CEUs monthly that are so amazing. We're finding at Monte Nido anyway, with our data, trauma and very trauma-based. And that is across the board in mental health space, substance use too. Trauma is the key beginning to that, but then it's also biological. So there is a really great chart that shows the percentage of how much biological it is and how much trauma causes it, things like that. So it's so interlaced with all of those things. But for example, I don't know the exact stat, but I know it's over 60% of our clients in treatment with us have PTSD. That's a high percentage of PTSD, because a lot of people will think of eating disorder as and I'll have this question from parents. Well, they're going to work on other stuff, right? They're not just going to come there to learn how to eat. And a lot of people believe it's just you send them there, they get regulated on their meals. Right. It is so complex, and it's truly all about the mental health. Yeah. And the food is the symptom, and that's what they're utilizing to control everything that's out of control. Yeah. I think research now today is really showing how. So we do see CPT. That's our main modality. All trauma-informed care, because that's really at the core of what's going on with eating disorders.
Yeah. Again, anecdotal, what I'm getting ready to share now, and I'm not a clinician either. Some of my own children and other students in the school, grades 5, 6, 7, if a child is just a little overweight, they become the target of bullies, basically. And then because of all the hormonal changes going on during that time, and then self-love and self-worth and all the dealing with all the emotions of becoming a teenager, who am I, trying to, and I just found that that can be a very traumatic experience for a young girl, bullying because of the way she looks. And then one of my daughters in particular is now 15 years past that incident and still has some of the effects from that very traumatic experience. So as you think back...
that really quick, too, so they have this experience in school, whatever it might be, around their peers, which they don't believe those things cause the eating disorder, definitely a factor. But then you go home, and that goes back to the diet culture conversation. Right. You're ingrained in most American families in diet culture of larger is bad, obesity is a thing. Right. In our industry, the O word is a no-no, because it's not about that. Because we would much rather help the mental health than label you as an obese person. I would be considered obese on the BMI scale. Right. That's how off the BMI scale is. So you go home to a family ingrained in diet culture, which it's not their fault. It is the way our society was produced in that way.
Well, they see it on TV every day too.
You think of the Yoplait commercial, the itty bitty red polka dot bikini commercial where you just eat a yogurt for lunch to fit into your bikini. Yeah. These are the messages that were being sent to us as kids, right? So So you're getting bullied at school, whatever it might be. You go home to a family who's like, yeah, start eating a little healthier then. Yeah. Why don't we just eat grilled chicken and rice, right? Yeah. Enter orthorexia, enter body dysmorphia, enter all of those thoughts. And that is just as someone who is learning who they are in that critical time, the brain begins to be rewired, right? And then hopefully you catch it early.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just mentioned middle school. As you think about your own younger experience, at what point did you know that you wanted to work in mental health and specifically eating disorders? Was it at a young age, or is it something that came much later? Yeah,
so I grew up in the mental health space. So I have my mom worked in the industry forever. So she actually worked at the Lincoln Center.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
Like probably 30 years ago.
Did you tell me that?
I don't think so, because I didn't know that until I went home and told her about my meeting with you all. Right. And so she started out in SAP counseling, working in schools through the Lincoln Center. So they sent her out into the schools. And so she then began working for treatment in mental health treatment and substance use. And slowly morphed into an outreach role like I do. So pretty much my whole life, I've been exposed to this. And I come from a whole line of family who's in recovery from substance use. So I grew up in this bubble of like Alcoholics Anonymous, mental health care, get therapy, talk about your feelings. I did not know that's what I was going to do. I took a while to launch because I went through my own struggles. So, but I got into the industry because I graduated from college, didn't know what I wanted to do, was kind of being wild. And my mom presented an opportunity to get into the substance use world by selling toxicology services. Okay. So that's where it all started. And within that job, I was exposed to like so many different people in recovery and the ways that you can treat your mental health and all these things that I didn't even know how severe my life looked, right? Till I was in the middle of it. Right. And I actually got sober from alcohol in that first year of that job. And so that started a catalyst of like reform of my whole life, basically. And really thrust me into the industry of knowing treatment centers, knowing who does what, knowing about insurance and what that looks like, what Medicaid means and how that works for people, right? So I did that for a while, and it was interesting because I'm good at talking, I'm good at selling, I'm good at being your friend, but I felt empty because I was experiencing this like new life. And I was like, wow, like I'm helping people in Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm doing really good like work community wise, but my job is like selling pee tests. Like it was not fulfilling. And it was an industry that was in a lot of gray area. There wasn't a lot of like regulations yet. It was not really morally okay to me. So I did that for a while. I got married. I then had my first child, and I ended up getting laid off from that job. And I could not leave that job. I was tied to it for security and money reasons. And something much bigger than me did for me what I could not do for myself. And they laid me off when I was on maternity leave. And like my boss cried. She's like, I'm so sorry we're doing this to you. And I was like, thank you. Like I needed that, right? Right. And so I ended up staying home with my first son for about a year. And I was lost. Like I didn't know what I was doing. I had all these connections and all these like great mentors and community relations. So anyway, my mom again is in the industry. She's deep in there, and she found me an interview for an admissions position just remotely so I could work from Georgia. I was in Georgia at the time, and for a program who did all different types of treatment. They had eating disorder there. They had mental health. They had substance. And this woman flew from Pennsylvania to Georgia to interview me. She gave me her time. She believed in me when I didn't believe in myself because I was like a new mom. I'm like, what do I have to offer? And she took me on and trained me from Georgia. And I got a real glimpse into like this side of the industry of working directly with the families, speaking to the clients. I was doing assessments for eating disorder for the eating disorder program 3 times a day. I got a ton of training. So it was like really, I started to feel like, okay, I'm actually doing something worth something, right? I can make a difference doing this. It is a business too. So there's like a piece of that salesy me that is okay with that. There's like a fine line, right? I think everyone in this industry knows that. Navigating that morally and knowing like what I can do morally for people and also continue to, it's a business. It also has to make money. So that's an interesting part of it. And fast forward, that job was amazing. I am so grateful. The woman who hired me, whenever I see her, I like almost tear up. I'm like, you changed my life. Because she took me on at a time when I was in the middle of Georgia. It was right before the pandemic.
Right.
I was already remote. What are the odds? So the whole world went remote. I was already remote. I had a job. I had a 1-year-old strapped to my back, taking calls. So I'm like, every time I see her, I'm like, you don't even know what you did for me. And so from there, it really spurred. And Monte Nido ended up having an opening in Philadelphia. I had moved back here, and it was just like, it's a needle in a haystack to find a job like this. So I was really lucky, and I fought for it. I was like, this is my job. You're giving it to me. Like, I was not going to let them turn me away. And I started there about 2 years ago. And ever since, I've dived into the eating disorder world so heavily. Like, it is so fascinating. Once you get a little taste of it, it's almost like you can't unsee what you're seeing. And it's so, like, you were talking about the statistics and just the stats that I know about, like, the second leading cause of death in mental health illnesses besides opiates is eating disorder. Like, people have no idea. People are dying from eating disorders. And we're all, 1 in 10, like you said, is walking around with some type of like disordered thinking, body dysmorphia, whatever it is. And it is a painful way to live. So it's fascinating to me. So now I'm just obsessed with learning about it.
You mentioned your mother making an introduction to this person, and you used the word connection. So obviously the name of this podcast is TLC Connections. Is there a specific moment in your life that you remember that, or a connection that was made, or a choice that was made, either a choice that you made or someone else made for you, that kind of had this kind of ripple effect, and then you look back and see how that one moment like made a huge impact in your life?
So yes, so obviously, I would not be where I am if I didn't have long-term sobriety, right? So when I look back on that, I remember being at this first job, and I was at a conference, and I was going to these conferences all the time. I was like almost a national salesperson, so I was going all over. It was super fun. I was like, this is great. I was young. What was I, like 26, 27? And so I remember I'm at this conference, and this woman said something, and I mentioned to her that I felt like I needed to be sober, but I didn't know how to do that. Even though I am growing, it's so baffling that I'm living in a home or growing up in a home with sober parents. I've never seen my parents drink or do anything. I grew up in this space. I grew up in mental health care, and I didn't know what to do. And she talked with me for like 45 minutes. I'll never forget. Her name's Dawn. And she just explained to me that it's not that serious. All I have to do is do one right thing the next time. And she set me up with a few things to do, maybe 1 or 2 things to do that next day. One of them was, I think it was to go find like a local Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. And one was to talk to my mom because she was sober. She's like, do you want to do that? And I was like, I think I could do that. And so I did those things. And they were simple. It wasn't this, see, in our minds, when we want to make like a big life change like that, it's like, I can't do this. There's no way. How am I going to live? What about at my wedding? Like all these thoughts go through your head about this thing that has been so important to you, which really is meaningless, right? Alcohol. It means nothing, but really it meant so much. And so she gave me these like 2 simple things, and the entire course of my life literally changed because of those simple directions. And I always remember, like, I don't remember her every day, but when someone asks, I'm like, oh, wow, she really just did the most simple thing. And so today, I'm so lucky because I get to do that for women. I might say something to me that seems so dumb and meaningless, but to them, it might like changes their whole trajectory, getting well or getting sober or getting mental health care. You know, it's really wild to think about that effect.
That's a great story. And as you think, so we've been spending some time in the past. As you think forward, what's the future look like for you?
It's so funny. I was just out front waiting to come in here on the phone, and they're putting in like a garden out there.
Yeah.
Is it a horticulture garden?
We're calling it one piece of that project. We're calling it the therapeutic garden.
It literally made me, so I'm obsessed with horticulture. I'm obsessed with plants. And I was talking to my friend who got me into plants. She's also in the industry. And I said, oh my gosh, you won't believe this. I think they're putting in like a therapeutic garden out here. It's amazing. And she's like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, and so I got her on FaceTime and showed her. And we were joking about in the future that we want to open up a coffee plant shop that has therapeutic services. And like this whole, such a big vision that I believe is possible maybe, right? In the future. Right. But I think my mom has really paved a way of like, she worked in this corporate type of situation for so long. And then she went out and retired and made a way for herself. And she does interventions with therapists and families, and she does family coaching, and she does all this great stuff for the community. And so she did it. I know it's possible. So I feel like there's something in the future there with me, but plants are involved for sure.
All right. So I'm hearing
and puppies maybe, I don't know.
All right, so I'm hearing some passions then. So passions are plants and puppies.
Plants.
And mental health. In terms of what does the future look like? I want to circle back to the mental health disorders related to eating, the eating disorders and the underlying mental health causes. Do you see, when I was looking at the statistics, I just saw grim. Worse and worse and worse. Do you see any hope of us turning the corner here, and what will be the catalyst for that? Do you see anything promising, I guess, to kind of turn this? Because I don't want to be a pessimist, but as I see the impacts of social media, we're consuming more of it, not less.
I think so. One plug, just data-wise, we're very into research at Monte Nido. So we collect a lot of data. We have this new outcome coming out. It's 12,000 clients. It's one of the biggest studies they've done in eating disorder recovery, like area. And they're good. They're really good. With the right treatment and the right teams, recovery is 100% possible. We believe that. We stand by that if you follow the directions. And you can see someone who goes to a residential setting, stays for 45 days, and then does not do any PHP IOP, which is partial hospitalization programming or intensive outpatient programming, and maybe just goes to like a outpatient therapist.
Got it.
The recovery rates plummet. When they do a track, even if it's not with us, PHP IOP, and then do a team afterwards, recovery rates are high. And they're all individualized. I can't say recovery from eating disorder. It's their depression rates at 6 months out of treatment, their depression rates at a year, their body dysmorphia thoughts out of 6 months out, a year out, right? So we've done it that way. Any of their eating disorder symptoms at 6 months out, a year out. There is a lot of hope. There is recovery. I think, too, another misconception is with eating disorder, it's like once you have it forever. You're screwed. You're never going to be well with food. 100% not true. And I think a lot of the people who do recover have to then delve into that, to helping others recover. And I see that in the future of it, like more and more people are recovering and more people are getting into helping others recover and doing research and getting involved. So I think there is a lot of hope.
That's great to hear, actually. Basically what I'm hearing you say is there's evidence-based interventions
100%.
that Monte Nido is working and is working, and the key is just for them to get involved in this program, right? And so
and other programs have evidence-based treatment too, and it's so great. And I think another piece to it is what I'm learning, and I'm starting to see it, so it's really exciting. Integrative care. Like, we are not integrated. So like our primary care physician is not integrated with our dietitian, with our therapist, with our treatment center. Integrating that. I worked with one outpatient provider who has integrative care, and they're linked to the doctor's office. They're linked to a therapist. They have psychiatry, and it's an integrative approach. I think that's the only way in mental health, substance, and eating disorder that we're going to have long-term recovery rates, because a lot of times no one's communicating. And we're like fighting the doctor to get us the labs to tell us about this and that. And it's totally insane. They should all be syncing, right? Yeah. So I think that's where it's moving to.
Yeah, that's promising as well. So for someone who might be listening or watching that is struggling with body dysmorphia or any other eating disorders or mental health, the underlying mental health disorders relating to that, what would you recommend? Where could they go, I guess, for more resources?
Yeah.
Well, what would you recommend where they start? Like you mentioned that person in your network that just gave you a couple simple steps. What are those couple simple steps for someone listening?
Totally. Especially people who've never delved into tackling it or looking at it. I always say, because sometimes they think, oh no, I can't go to treatment. That's crazy. No, you don't have to do that. I think the coolest thing about eating disorder is dietitians. I love the dietitian piece, and they're so therapeutic, and they're trained around this anti-diet culture scenario where just begin there. Start just helping your relationship with food. Our relationship with food is skewed. It's crazy how everything, media, the world, everything has made our relationship with food toxic almost. Yeah. And so beginning there, that's all you have to do. Start with a session with a dietitian and see, what does my eating look like? Is it helping my mental health or is it not? It might not be an eating disorder. And sometimes just that little bit of intervention gets you to a place where, like, I know a lot of women, I do CrossFit competitively and they don't eat enough. We're not eating enough. We were taught to eat 1,200 calories. That's crazy. Right. Once you're just nourishing, you might even, none of all those thoughts might go away, when your brain is nourished. So I would always start there.
As you're talking about our food, I was, not to bring in politics into this discussion, but I don't know how much you follow it, if at all, but RFK Jr. Wants to get involved in the FDA. He has some ideas about food. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh my God. I'm going to go there.
Okay.
I think it's dangerous.
Yeah.
I think it's really dangerous for our mental health population. And I think I've followed a lot about content creators that are, crunchy moms, they call it, the almond mom. And that is everything that we don't stand for in eating disorder. And I've had to train even my family around my kids, like bad food, good food. Right there, you start out with your children saying bad food, good food, you just gave them negative ideas about food. And it is beginning to rewire them. So I think, it'll be interesting. And I think, like, I've been joking about the war on Fruit Loops that he has. Like, it's already a war on Fruit Loops. Right. Like, we love Fruit Loops. Like, protect the Fruit Loops, my friend. And we joke about it at home because I think there's just not enough information either on what country is using what food dyes and who's not and why, right? I think a lot of regulations could be good, but I think, taking away regulations is not going to be the answer. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see who's going to go drink raw milk and fight listeria. We'll find out, I guess. But yeah, I think anti-diet culture is just where I hope we go. Promoting food neutrality. That's what we want. Like, there's no bad or good. And my son will sometimes say, well, that's not a good snack. And I'm like, any snack's a good snack. If you're nourishing your brain, eat it, right? Now, we need some boundaries, sure. Right. But food neutrality, I don't want food to run my life. Right. We don't want drugs to run our life, right? So I think, I would hope in the future that's where we get. It'll be a long time until we get there, for sure.
Okay, thank you so much for the work that you do. You obviously have a passion for it, a calling to make a difference. And so thank you. And thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me. This was great. Thanks.
TLC Connections is supported in part by the Lincoln Center for Family and Youth. Through education, counseling, coaching, and consulting, we empower people to make positive choices, meaningful connections, and transformational change. To learn more, visit thelincolncenter.com.